or even interact with some of the awesome little buddy. Or you can just play in the fountain. Or even pet some baby ducklings. Here you go. Check out platinumlist.net because we've got amazing deals for you. Hey, it's Joe Mango here down in Asman with the Quest for Adventure guys. They do some amazing kayaking tours through the mangroves, but also they do a little bit of wakeboarding as well, and hopefully I can do better than that guy. Wish me luck. So we've now come to the mangroves in Asman and we're about to go do some kayaking. Absolutely amazing day down at the mangroves in Asman. Elaine, thank you so much. Is that everything? We covered it all?
No, just one more thing.
Woo! Oh.
3, 2, 1.
This is probably the most iconic hotel in the UAE and possibly the world. Let's go check out the water park. It's been a pretty amazing day. Get your tickets, platinumlist.net.
Okay, welcome to another edition of Sporting Jibberish Talks To. We're joined by former world number one squash player Laura Massaro. Good afternoon, Laura, there in the UK. I hope you're well. How has lockdown been treating you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having me on, guys. People have, I think, like with things starting to open up a little bit more in the UK, it's a little bit better. But I kind of have been not too bad with lockdown. I guess retiring, being traveling, being away a lot, it's kind of been quite nice to actually spend a little bit of time at home, really. And then I started to get a little bit bored. So yeah, excited to get back on the squash court. Had my first hit back on Saturday. Had quite a severe knee injury actually post-retirement, which is a bit random, but so I've been slowly making my way back for that. So actually lockdown has been pretty good for trying to recover and trying to get my knee strong again. So yeah, it hasn't been too bad. I mean, I know there's a lot of other people who've had different experiences, but not too bad for me at all.
Awesome. Laura, when you started out, obviously when you were a little girl, knee high to a grasshopper, am I correct in saying born in Yarmouth but grew up in Chorley? Is that right?
Yeah, I was born in Great Yarmouth, and my dad worked for Pontins, the old holiday camp, and worked behind the bar at the Pontins in Pakefield, and then he got promoted. So we lived on campus on the Prestatyn camp for a couple of years, and then promoted again to head office, which was in Eccleston, so in the northwest. So I've lived up in the northwest since I was about 7 maybe. So I'm a proper Lancastrian. I've got all the accent to go with it.
That's what me and you will get on alright. Jack gives me grief all the time about his accent.
And actually, Great Yarmouth's not too far from where I'm from. I'm from Lincolnshire originally, so just around the corner from the wash. You know, around the wash there. So,
yeah.
So when you moved up to Chorley, obviously squash is a great sport, but it's not one that your everyday person potentially picks up. Was it a dream that from the young age you were going to be a squash player, or did that develop later on?
Yeah, I think really similar story to probably most pro squash players, or just squash players, I guess, at any level, is, you know, spending a lot of time down at the local squash club. Parents both played, particularly my dad. It's a good place to lock a kid, isn't it? In a four walls kind of square box, shut the door behind you, and off you go. So yeah, that kind of, you know, parents socializing in the bar, few of the kids playing on the squash courts and stuff. And I guess it helps when you're good, doesn't it? It helps when you're good at something when you're young. And I was fairly good, fairly young, at least in my local area. So yeah, I'm sure you've got questions along sort of the lines of like how do you get good? But it's funny how some of it is just natural. My dad said the first time he ever took me on a squash court, I volleyed the ball, meaning kind of the hand-eye coordination maybe was a little bit more natural than some. And then your personality has got a massive amount to do with it, hasn't it? It's got to do with your drive and your determination and having the right mindset. So I guess that sort of helped, and definitely not the most skillful of natural players when it comes to kind of the skill of the game. My skill and my talents certainly lay kind of in more of the mindset, determination, mental strength side rather than the skill side. But I kind of like to say that because it just shows that you can have skill at, you know, kind of maybe not the standard way people perceive skill and talent, and you can still achieve a lot. So yeah, just started traveling around a little bit more. Never really wanted to be pro. Kind of went to Preston College 16 to 18, left there at 18. We'd won the World Team Championships under 19 for England. Applied to go to university and deferred my place for a year to give it a shot on tour, and then never went. So yeah, that's kind of my young story really. World champion as part of the Team England, and then kind of went pro, made it up the rankings fairly quickly within that first year. That gave me enough confidence to kind of kick on.
So what does I've got absolutely no idea, what does a pro squash player, what does it look like when you made that move at 19? Clearly travelling around the world, are you on your own a lot? Did you have a coach? You know, what is the life of a pro squash player all about?
Yeah, so luckily for me, and I say this like, you know, probably I was probably one of the athletes, certainly squash, that has seen the most amount of lottery funding. So lottery funding came in right around that World Junior Championships. So we played that World Junior Championships in Penang in Malaysia. We had more support staff come with us than we did players, which shows the amount of money that we had. I was getting quite well funded from around 17, 18, and that carried on through my senior career. And then funding's sort of just starting to drop off now, maybe the last couple of years. So at the height of lottery funding, I came through, which was unbelievable, because it really takes a little bit of pressure off. It really gives you that leg up to be able to travel a little bit more freely. So yeah, I left college and with a little bit of funding under my belt and set off. And the tour itself, the squash tour, runs very similar to the tennis tour in that you sort of play in certain levels and blocks. So the smallest tournament you can play on the main tour is about $5,000 event, meaning that's the total prize fund for the whole draw. And there's normally 16 players in a draw. And the most amount would be the World Championships, for example, which was 2 years ago, was the highest ever, as $500,000. So that's the range of events. So obviously you start off at those $5,000 events and you try and work your way up, 10,000, 20,000, and the higher up your ranking is. Whereas those top ones, the draw extends to kind of the 32, 48 draw. And then obviously you have to be ranked inside the top 32 to even get in that event. And yeah, that's sort of how it works. So off I went, traveling around a few 5Ks, generally sort of staying with families rather than hotels, which is quite tough as well, staying with strangers and traveling. And you sort of just pair up with the other girls really, and you get to know them, and you get to you socialize a lot with them, which makes it hard as well, because then you're also playing them. So it's a tough one, and that definitely changed and transitioned through my career as I started to really try and attack the top of the rankings. That definitely changed, because I felt that you couldn't socialize with your opponents, and that it was almost giving a little bit of your, not necessarily your secrets away, but you when you keep yourself to yourself a little bit more, I think you create a little bit of an aura around you and an unknown factor, which is what a couple of the girls around me were doing. And I know how that felt, and I kind of wanted to give that perception off for myself to the other girls. So it was a choice, and a very much sort of, it was a personal choice to go about the tour as a job and attack it as a job, rather than playing it as a job, obviously, but kind of also trying to make friends along the way. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, I'll probably only have maybe 2 or 3 people who are probably really class as friends and who I'll keep in touch with now I'm retired, whereas that won't be the case for everyone.
My question, I find it very interesting, is you're talking about training and being with these girls day in, day out. Obviously, the understanding is Jack's main sport is cricket and mine was football, so training for us was you're in a team environment, you're very much individual, you're on your own. So how does a training day look like? So obviously you would do your drills and your set skills, but how would it look like? Because I know at some point we'd then be back together as a team and we'd be working on set pieces or formations or shape and things like that. And how many hours a day would you dedicate to training?
I mean, it varied a lot throughout my career, but I guess if we talk about what the most successful part of my career, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So yeah, sort of probably, I guess, leading into that kind of like what I just described a little bit about really focusing in on trying to, like, you know, I'd hung around that 12 top 10, top 12 in the world level for a year or 18 months. And I think it's really important to sort of add that throughout my journey, I got up to a certain ranking fairly quickly. And then I kind of stagnated for a while as well, which I think is a good thing. I think you learn, I think you have to settle in. I think you have to be ready. With squash, it's funny, I guess the same in any sort of individual sport where you're playing on a tour. You break, let's say I break top 25. To break that top 20 level, you have to be beating the players in the top 16 to get the ranking points to kick you above them. Same when you go top 12 in the world's great, but the next ranking bracket above that is top 8 to be seeded to make quarterfinals. And to obviously get top 8 in the world, you have to be beating top 8 in the world, which means having real shots at world number 1s, 2s, 3s, obviously all of them. So yeah, it was a very sort of, I stagnated for a while at that 10, 12 in the world. And I think probably when I pushed on, it was really looking at all parts of my game. So when you talk about kind of how did it look like at my very best, and then from there even higher into the top 4 in the world, say, you were looking at kind of strength and conditioning coach. I had my coach in Harrogate. I had Danny, who I was on court with for my husband, for those who are kind of don't know. I was seeing a physio really regularly. I had hitting partners. And so it wasn't necessarily even mixing with the girls on tour unless I was kind of in a real need for like a practice match against another woman, because the women play quite differently to the men, obviously. So my week would generally kind of lay out like I'd try and go. My strength and conditioning trainer was in Sheffield. It was brilliant. So I'd try and go over there for a day, generally sort of have a hit in the afternoon at one of the local squash clubs over there to kind of utilize the trip and make the journey worthwhile. Otherwise it was like 4 hours in the car for kind of a 2-hour session. It really changed with him in that he was a squash player. He understood the game. He understood how hard it was. And he knew me as a player from watching me from afar. And we really changed my training from kind of going to, he was like, I want you to be able to go flat out and hang on, rather than like, you're amazing at kind of going at a really steady pace for like a really long time. So that was the change in tactic there. And I'd go over and I just felt like he had my back and, you know, we were in it together. And then my coach was in Harrogate, so I'd go over there. Generally, I'd go over there with Danny, which was brilliant. He'd video a lot of the sessions and then we'd come back and we just worked on it. So tough dynamic at home, having a husband who was, you know, part of my coaching team. He had a brilliant relationship with my main coach, like my technical coach, who was in Harrogate. And so then they together would work on a lot of stuff at what I needed to work on and talk about it. And then Danny and I would go on and work on that. And then the good thing for women, I guess, overall, is that you can always train with blokes. You can always get on court and there's always a bloke that's better than you down the road. So I'd be training and hitting with a lot of semi-pro guys or county level guys who were really good for me to have a hit with. And then on top of that, you know, talking about nutrition. So it's really hard to kind of put an hourly kind of number on how much I was training, because it really is a 24-hour job. From the minute you get up in the morning, you're preparing your breakfast to get the most out of your morning session. Then you've got your morning session, then lunch, then you're stretching down, then lunch is the same. Then you've got rest. So you might be chilling and resting, but you're preparing to attack the second session. Quite often that session would then happen, and then the third session would either be a yoga session or a stretch down at night. And then your dinner is obviously repairing from what you've done, hydrating, and then going to bed to make sure you've got the right sleep. So it's probably, if you have to put a number on it, you're looking at somewhere between 4 and 5 hours a day. But it really is kind of a lot, mindset wise, it's so much more than that.
So listening to all that, it's no surprise then that you eventually got to world number one. What was that like? What is it like being a world number one? Because we could only dream of it. What is it like being a world number one in your chosen sport? And you talked about creating an aura around you, so obviously all those things that you put into it, it worked. And did it come with a pressure? Did you enjoy it? Was there a bit of both?
Yeah, well, I guess it's for anyone who doesn't know squash, it's probably fair to give a little bit of background in that World Juniors I spoke about. I played that World Junior with a woman called Nicole David, who was from Malaysia, Penang, in fact, where we played that World Juniors. And she was world number one for 8 straight years, which was brutal because, you know, I'm the exact same age as her. So I came through World Juniors together in 2001 and we played our whole career, and we actually retired at the exact same event in May 2019, which is just freaky. So she's going to go down as a legend of the sport. No one's going to argue that. She is, you know, won, I think it was kind of 8 years at world number one, maybe 9. It was 8 world titles. It was 5 British Open titles. So the majority of my career was spent trying to catch her, to be honest. And as I guess athletes, she made me a better athlete by she raised the bar for women's squash, and I was trying to catch that. So while I was probably one of the first to kind of start to beat her, she was so far ahead in the rankings that beating her twice a year wasn't enough unless someone else was doing it as well. So I'd win the odd tournament. I won Player of the Year because I beat her a couple of times. That was how good she was. Starting to chip away at that a little bit, really. And the World Championship win actually came before it, and that, you know, and I'd won a British Open, which for us is like the Wimbledon of squash. It's the one with the most history and the prestigiousness with all the names on the trophy. And honestly, was totally happy with that. You know, not many people have a Nicole David in their era, let alone from like day one to day end. So the world number one spot was something that I probably never thought was going to happen. She was just there, and she was world number one, and I wasn't consistent enough to get there. And then all of a sudden, a couple of young Egyptian girls came out of the woodwork, and the Egyptian girls have sort of taken the level of women's squash now to the next level. They're unbelievable. So that's a whole nother subject. But all of a sudden, there was a couple of us that started to get into her, particularly a very young Noor El Shabini, who was super talented and kind of making really major finals even while she was still in the juniors. So the reason I sort of go into all this background is because then it finally came when I had one match to play to be world number one. And Nicole had actually been knocked off the top spot by Raneem El Walili, and it was me and Raneem and probably Noor Shabini, I'd say, that were all beating her, and Raneem was the one that knocked her off to start. And then I had a match in Hong Kong in the semi-final, and it was just like, whoever wins this match is going to go to world number one. You're that close. So I never thought that I'd actually have a chance to play for a world number one spot, because it's not. I just thought I'd be at home on the 1st of January and the rankings come out and it'd be a surprise. So that was, I was like to the guy, why have you told me that? I don't need to know that before I'm about to play. But then obviously in hindsight, you kind of course I want to know that. I would hate to have come off and not known I was playing on such a big occasion. So yeah, off I went, prepared for that. And calm, and I thought I could tell she was a bit nervous on that day, and it settled me down a little bit, and she didn't play great for the first 2 games, and then I'd really got into my groove, and I managed to win 3-0, like which is unheard of really against the world number 1, world number 2 or 3 I think it was at the time. And yeah, like I came off and I'd won, and it meant that on the 1st of January to be honest. Didn't enjoy it. I'm a bit of an underdog. I like to prove people wrong. I like to come from behind. I like to sneak up. I'm always at my most dangerous when I've perhaps lost in the event before. Always at my most dangerous perhaps when someone said, when someone's not mentioned me as a favourite for a tournament. So yeah, if I'm honest, particularly enjoy being in that top spot. It was an unbelievable achievement, and I'm really, really came. And that's probably, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a regret, because I'm not sure there was something that I'm not sure that it was just in my nature. So obviously I would have liked to have gone, if I could go back, I would like to handle that situation in a different way, but I'm not sure I would call it a regret, because it was just part of the experience and part of the path. But it didn't really suit my game or my personality to kind of lead from the front and top a draw and have all that pressure on me to be like, if you don't win this event, then it's failure, basically was how I saw it. So being a world number 2 or a world number 3, and then kind of taking a title always felt like a really nice place to be for me. I think like obviously living together and like any husband and wife, you probably, I'm going to share with him a lot more of kind of my concerns and my worries and my, even more so than I would do with my coach. And he's there, isn't he, when I come home and I've had a good day at training or a bad day at training, and he gets the brunt of the good and the bad. And from early on in our relationship, Danny was kind of really into learning about psychology and understanding and personality typing, and that was just all of like a real benefit to me. I think the one thing that was a huge bonus for us was that I guess the difference when you're so close with someone is that there's a level of honesty there that perhaps just simply can't be there between a player and a coach, or a player and psychologist, because sometimes it's brutal and it's actually pretty harsh. But ultimately, I think I knew that we were married, and he loves me no matter what, and he's not saying it to like hurt me, he's saying it to be honest. And I guess luckily my personality is that I might not have took it so well at the time, but ultimately I always wanted to be better. I always wanted to improve. So after I'd calmed down and maybe thought about it and took it on board, then there would be action. And that's why I think we've worked quite well in terms of a relationship when it comes to trying to attack being the best in the world, because he would just be brutally honest, and I would then take it on board and actually act on that. Whereas, trying to be that honest with someone and then sending them home is really tough. Like, what are they thinking? What are they doing? Have they taken it the wrong way? and then also, you know, like he wrote his book, The Winning Parent, because his relationship with parents was really good in terms of trying to help young athletes. But I think that was how I sort of saw it with us. It was like he understood that relationship with parents and kids, because in a strange sort of way, it was the same sort of dynamic between him and myself. Obviously not a parent and a child, but just that kind of like overbearing, like he wanted it as much as I did, and you stood on the sidelines unable to do anything. It's a very similar dynamic. And, you know, he just wanted the best for me. So yeah, and I've obviously had other psychologists, and we've needed to take time away from that. You know, I've needed to see other people because, you know, I need to kind of have that separation at times as well. But understanding my personality and having him to, you know, I've had a rubbish day at training, what's gone on, and then just like, well, what do you expect if you're going to go to bed that late and eat that and do that, and just that brutal honesty of like, you know, well, what do you expect? You're trying to be the best in the world, and then that thinking. So yeah, ultimately it's been great, and he's improved himself from, you know, as a squash coach over the years, and he just tag teamed with my coach in Harrogate brilliantly, and almost was like looked up to him as a mentor. So when you've got someone on your team that's almost as dedicated as you are, then it's only going to help, isn't it?
Absolutely. So not away from squash, but away from the pro circuit, looked at the Commonwealth Games. What's that like? Because obviously that must be slightly different to being on the pro tour as an individual.
Yeah. Again, not, if I'm being brutally honest, not my favourite events. I love to represent my country. Pulling on an England vest is brilliant. But I'm a fish out of water in all of the events that I played. I couldn't have my coach there. I couldn't have my team around me. I was surrounded by, you know, the team who were friends, and, you know, I was part of that team, of course, but I need my, you know, I'm so used to playing with my team around me that I really struggled with that. My doubles actually was probably the best experience from a Commonwealth Games. We don't play squash doubles at any other time other than at the Commonwealth Games, and coming together with Jenny to win 2 silver medals, one in Delhi and one in Glasgow, was so much fun, because I actually did feel like I was playing with a mate. And that was probably my best experience of the Commonwealth Games. I won a silver in Glasgow in the individual as well, losing to Nicole in the final. But I just didn't massively enjoy the experience an awful lot, like being at that village feel and not being able to get out, and it was really tough on me. But from a sporting perspective, to have an event that transcends squash a little bit, you know, where everyone just tunes in, it's actually really weird, because I think Glasgow is coming up to about this time of the year, because Facebook tells me that I've got like all these memories. People are like, I'm watching Laura Massaro play in the final, and good luck, Laura Massaro's on the BBC, and you're like, you don't get that with any other event, because the BBC doesn't show any squash. So you know, that's the thing that the Commonwealth Games gives you. And, you know, going into the BBC studio after you've won your medals with Gary Lineker and the other medalists, and being part of that is something really, really special. But I found the whole experience a lot tougher than perhaps I needed to be. Maybe I was just being really dramatic, but it was more kind of like, I felt like a fish out of water in those sort of environments than anything else.
So we're talking about, you obviously, Commonwealth wasn't your be on end all. When you were going around your circuit and you were going across the different international venues, was there any venues you literally turned up and thought, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? Was there anything like that? Or any interesting stories about any of these events?
There's a couple of venues that stick out. The absolute best venues are the one, like the best thing about squash is that you can put a squash court anywhere. It can pop up. It's a 4-sided glass wall that we court that we play on, and the one that everyone always says is Grand Central Station in New York. We put a court in the Vanderbilt Hall, and it's unbelievable. You know, thousands and thousands of people daily walk past the squash court and stop and have a little look. The one for me that stands out as well is the China Open in Shanghai. They put a glass court on the 16th floor of the Peninsula Hotel, overlooking the Bund, which is unbelievable. Like, I mean, it's not only is it up high, but it's the view of the Bund and the whole of Shanghai is pretty unbelievable. I haven't actually played it myself, but there's several events in front of the pyramids of Giza. So, you know, a glass court in front of the pyramids, and the pictures are spectacular. And then, of course, Dubai, in front of Khalifa and in the Opera House and stuff. It was just unbelievable. So so many cool venues, and there's more. Like, I can literally go on and on and on the amount of places that we've played, but it's pretty special to be able to have an event in those places.
So, bearing all that in mind, how difficult the decision was it to retire sort of just over a year ago, or was it an easy decision? Because I know when you listen to other sports, men and women, some find that it was the right thing to do. Other people were always toying with it and sort of almost regret it to a degree.
I think when you asked that question, then I was just about to go really easy, like jump in and go really easy, because I was losing and I wasn't winning as much as I wanted to. But it's actually like, and then as you sort of started asking the question, I'm like, what are you on about? It wasn't easy. It was like, for about 2 years, I was just going, am I done? Am I not? Have I got more to give? Is that loss is it just a bad result, or am I just kind of slowing down a bit? You know, and then I'd do really well and kind of get to a semi-final and really get stuck into kind of like the world number 1 or the world number 2 and be like, I'm all right, I'm back. And then I'd lose to someone a bit lower ranked. And that was the thing. So throughout my whole career, I think because of, like I talked about at the beginning, the professionalism that I bring to my training and the mentality of being the best that I can be, and not having so much talent in terms of racket skills. The one thing that has been probably that I'm most grateful for was the consistency in terms of results. It was really, really rare that, firstly, I underestimated opponent. I took every opponent that I ever played really seriously and was always really worried that I was going to lose. And the upside of that is that you very rarely do lose, because you've taken your opponents so seriously, and you've really kind of, you know, looked at a game plan and done it, and the physicality was always there. The work had already always been done. So to start losing to people who were sort of outside the top 13 or 14 in the world, top 15 in the world, was really unusual. And for it to happen kind of a little bit more regularly. I remember one match at the Tournament of Champions where we played on this all amazing glass court, and I'd won my first round. I'd played great, and I went down for my last 16 match, and it was like I couldn't think, I couldn't concentrate. It was all going away from me. She was playing really well, and I seemingly was kind of 1 minute warming up. Next minute, the match just went a million miles an hour, and I was just back sat in my kit, sweating with my bag in my hotel room, literally going, what on earth just happened then? I don't know what happened. And that was that started to really hit home a little bit more, that it was like, I don't know what's happening here, why I'm having these results. And secondly, matches just don't go that quickly for me. I can always normally figure something out. So, but then I'd turn up for my next event and have a great event and be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't retire. And it was just so hard. It was really hard. And until I actually just said, I'm retiring and I'm doing it on that date, there was always an if in my mind. It was like, I think I've decided I'm going to retire at the end of the season. But in my mind, I was going, yeah, but if I have a couple of good events, I'll be able to talk myself out of it. And until I just went, I'm done, I'm retired, even if I win. And this is where Danny was great too, because he'd be like, you've won a British Open, you've won World Championships, you've got to world number 1. Does it really matter if you have one more? Does it really matter if you get another? Is it 3 rather than 2 British Opens, 2 rather than 1 World Championships? Like, you're 35, turning 36, like, come on. And it was sort of those sort of chats that were like, actually, yeah, like, you kind of have to get to a point and you have to go, what I've achieved is brilliant, but it's now time to step aside and let the young ones do it a little bit more. And 36 is pretty old for professional sport. I know people say it's not old, but it kind of is really, isn't it? And even more so for women too, because of the muscular speed and everything. So yeah, sorry, that was a really long-winded way of saying it was really hard.
Like the way we like it. Right, so we've got some inside information. Well, we've got some friends of ours that know you through your squash days. Hannah and Johnny Underhill.
Yeah.
So he tells me that your brother's also a squash player.
He is more of a squash coach. Yeah, he's living in the US now.
So I'm going to throw this out there. Who wins, you or him?
Is it? What are the odds of him watching this?
I'll tag him in later.
I'm probably going to have to say him, I'm probably going to have to say him because he's a little nightmare. He knows all my, it gets in my head. He's probably the only one that can get in my head. Not even Danny can get in my head.
That's the thing. So the second part of the question would be interesting. Is obviously you give your brother one there, we'll let him take that one. Is the difference between males and female squash that vast that they can play in competition against each other? You mentioned before that you played against county players and semi-pro players. Obviously, the physicality aspect. Because I know squash is not supposed to be contact, but they are coming together. So is it a big difference between the two? Could they ever compete against each other?
Yeah, no, it's pretty big difference. It'd be the same in tennis. It's just I think the biggest difference is the speed. There's a big speed element. So just in terms of how many balls the boys get back, there's a strength element obviously to that. I think yeah, it's just it'd be really tough to kind of handle as a woman. It'd be really tough to handle the pace of a top bloke. That even just down to like the turning. With squash, there's a lot of whipping over your body. The cross courts and stuff can be like, the strength that a man could have on that backhand side to whip you across to the forehand side, and the ball's sort of gone. And like even with women's like hips and the turning and stuff, like it's hard. So. Probably similar in tennis. I'm imagining that, a really good county level tennis player on the bloke side would get stuck into a pretty high level world ranked female player. And that's the same with Danny. Like, Danny's the top in his country for like in the Masters at his age group. Played kind of probably middle order in the county squad when he was a bit younger. And we would have, when I was at my best, I could mark whether I was playing well on whether I was beating him or not. But it was hard, like really hard, just because of the amount of balls that he can get back. Like technically and squash wise and playing the game, I'm at a much higher level, but it just levels itself all out on the physicality. So yeah, it's kind of a county level bloke would probably be up there at the top women's end.
Yeah, maybe. Sorry, Kat. Maybe I asked the wrong question. Maybe it should be who wins between you and Danny.
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely was like me. although to be quite honest, the reason my brother could beat me was because he gets in my head and he plays me as a woman. He flicks me and he turns me and he annoys me and he plays the exact way that I would hate. Whereas Danny plays more like me and I can get in his head. So I can like pull the faces in like, you're not getting dinner later if you start this. Whereas with my brother, it wasn't like that as much. So it's tough, isn't it, to kind of compare.
Now, I have played a bit of squash because I find it really good my cricket skills. Even though I bat left-handed, I play racket sports with my right hand. So I'm quite good on my backhand basically. But really, what I was going to say was, I've been hit by a squash ball. I've been hit by a cricket ball. I've been hit by a squash ball. They hurt. So have you had any sort of freak injuries or bad injuries from being hit by a squash ball? Clearly, you'll be playing an environment that a lot faster than when I'm playing.
Yeah, generally it's not too bad. I mean, at the pro level, you're obviously really you're more likely to get hit with someone who isn't as good, really, because they're not as in control of the ball. But doubles is an absolute shocker, obviously.
you said that earlier, I can't envisage that actually. I didn't even know.
The court's wider by like a metre, say, each side, so it's significantly wider. But there's no strokes. So whereas in squash, if you hit a really loose shot and you impede your opponent, you get the point. In doubles, they very, very rarely give strokes. So people are just more likely to hit the ball, and you might be stood right there. So yeah, I've been drilled a couple of times in doubles, and dead legs, people flying into the back of your calves and all that sort of stuff. But now I'm retired, I see the cricketers on the local pitch here, and I'm like, I quite fancy giving that a go. And Danny's like, I reckon I could middle the bat and give it a little go. He's like, nah, you'd be out left, right and centre. And then I see a ball and how fast it comes down, and I'm like, oh.
It's all hand-eye. It's all hand-eye, like you said before.
Yeah.
I actually started playing after I'd broken my wrist actually one summer, so in the winter to get some strength back, and I hate running, so it was just more like a I really enjoy it. But, beforehand, backhand's not too bad.
Well, hey, look, if you ever end up back out here, Laura, we'll take you out with Jack will play at squash, and then I'll ball a few balls at you, and you can have a quick I made that this week.
I just need someone to give me a go, see whether I can actually do it before I, trunch on down to the cricket pitch and go, come on then, I'll be part of the team. The only thing is when you're batting, you have to stand around a lot, don't you?
I've got a nice little bowling machine at school. It just does 99 miles an hour. We'll just stick it to that and see how we go. My question is, obviously, now you're retired, what's the plan for Laura Massaro? What's she doing now, and what's the plan for you?
Well, I think I'm, finding that I'm really passionate about coaching and helping. Probably partly understanding a little bit more about the game now that I'm on the other side of it, and I can actually, almost debrief what actually happened in my career and the bits that you needed. And I went in, I've been retired a year now, so I went in all guns blazing. I'm like, just do this, in my head, I didn't say this, but in my head, I'm like, if you just do this, this and this, you'll be fine. And I'm perhaps like learning a little bit that I didn't, until I'm sort of saying to you guys and like starting to understand that I maybe didn't give myself enough credit for the talent that I had being in the monotonous day-to-day kind of like following of programs. And I've sort of started to realize within my coaching that it's maybe not as easy for people to do as I thought it was. I'm not saying it was easy for me. I'm just saying that I almost found a little bit of comfort in having my whole week laid out and just following it. And for me, it was easy. It was like, if it's in front of you, you just do it. But the more I speak to other players, it's quite scary to have that kind of pinned down confinedness to the training. So of course, I want to help, and I want to try and help and coach and be part of other people's journey, and to try and help them achieve more than they have. But starting to kind of realize that it really is their journey, and it has to be their mindset, and that you can only actually give them as much as they're willing to take. So I'm learning, and I know obviously how to play the game, and I know how I ticked, and I've got to learn how there's different ways that other people tick and how to get the most out of those. So that'll be really interesting. And I'm also still like working with England squash in that capacity with some of the young England girls, and I'm also working with Head, who were my racket sponsor when I was playing, and they found a way to keep me on board as kind of an ambassador, sort of pro player consultant. So I'm dealing with the Head players that are still part of the Head brand, which is really exciting, and that will enable me to get out to travel to some of the events as well. And then a little bit at the local county level. So it's great because I've got kind of different levels going on. And so yeah, that's it on the coaching side. And then I'm just in the process of editing a book, which is scary and exciting all at the same time. That was due to come out kind of before Christmas, but now I'm not really sure when we're going to do it, because obviously I need to promote it a bit. So probably after Christmas. Some of the stories that maybe I've kind of touched upon here, and particularly the proving people wrong stuff, I think that is a really big part of it for me, and getting under the skin of that a little bit, and also the, you know, just kind of making the most of situations. And everybody always just thought how mentally strong I was. So I think in the book I kind of want to go into, you know, you can't, that obviously I did a really good job of giving that, you know, being that person who was mentally strong, but that wasn't always the case. And I think sometimes you can just help. I'd love to know that a 15, 16-year-old, 14-year-old had picked up the book and taken something from it. That's what I think when I pick up an autobiography, I want to learn something from them, or nick a trick or something like that. And really kind of, you know, all of the books I've read over my career, I set up a YouTube channel down in lockdown to kind of try and get some of this information out to people. And one of the things I want to put on there is like my top 5 books that I've read in like sports psychology, like autobiographies and like kind of spiritual self-help books, because I think when you read and you kind of get a lot of that, then it's important. And that's what I want to kind of get from the book that I'm doing. I just want to help 1 or 2 people kind of understand themselves a bit better. So yeah, that's what I'm doing in the end of lockdown, editing my manuscript.
And just one final thing we ask all of our guests in the pro sports, and you touched on it a little bit, so I kind of think I know what the answer is going to be, but you could sit down with budding squash players, young squash players, or young sports girls and boys, what would be your top tip or top advice for them to make sure that you get the best from their ability?
Well, actually, yeah, probably not something I've touched upon, but and this might come from a little bit of kind of me not doing it as much as I hoped, but especially now in this day and age, the one thing that I would just say to kids in any sport is 2 things really. One is just watch and copy, and just, you know, whatever sport you're in, get a favorite player, watch them, copy them, pretend to be them, have fun, practice different shots, just have that freedom on court. And this, the second one is kind of practice on your own. So I think I could have probably done a little bit better at kind of, actually, squash is great for that. It's 4 walls, the ball always comes back to you. You can go on and just hit, you know, 1,000 balls in an hour, and, you know, just enough you walk with your bag. So it's sort of like, not only kind of can you watch on YouTube, and for squash there's like Squash TV. I'm sure most sports have their own kind of streaming platforms now. So not only can you just watch so much more than, you know, I was able to back in kind of like the 90s and early 2000s, you can just literally get any sport and just watch and copy, and then actually go and do it, go and practice it, and just spend some time on your own, really refining your skills, because it'll just come back. It'll come back, you know, in abundance later on in your career, I'm sure. So that's actually something that I think is really important when you're young, particularly learning your craft.
Okay, so if anybody out there wants to catch up with what Laura's doing at the moment, or wants to have a look at what's going on, it's lauramassaro.co.uk, is that correct?
Yep, lauramassaro.co.uk, and then I think Twitter's LJ Massaro, and then I think on Facebook and Instagram it's Laura Massaro, just straight. So yeah.
Thank you very much.